Welcome to the podcast, David. It's so good to have you on this episode.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, thank you for the invite. It's I can't wait to get started.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
So yeah, my money story, I would say it's evolved over time, to say the least. You know, if I go back to my younger days or early 20s, I think certainly my parents have had they have had a big impact, and maybe the Northeast culture as well. You know, that in the Northeast here, I live 15 minutes away from Newcastle upon Tyne. I think it's fair to say that it's not the most affluent area, if you like. There's a lot of industry, although it is changing, and it has changed a lot over the last 20 odd years. I think that's had a bearing certainly on my parents' attitude towards money, and then that's likewise had the shift. But certainly, you know, I think life events at different stages in my life have meant that this story that I build up in my head has most definitely changed.
And are you aware of what has changed over the years?
Yeah, so I think a big value of my dad's would be if a job needs done, do it yourself. Whereas from what I've learned through my work and then from other people, I suppose I see successful people. That's not saying my dad's not successful, but yeah, I sort of see successful people who are maybe earning a lot of money and they've got a more lavish lifestyle, are very good at delegating and actually, yes, seeking out help. So I've always had that battle, I would say. And going back to the whole life events, when different things have happened, maybe I do revert back to type, where you try to do too much yourself. So it's something I'm aware of, and I have to keep, I suppose, journaling about it and reminding myself.
And are you aware that you want your children to have a different money story to the one that you brought through from your childhood?
Good question. I suppose it's not something I've thought about too much with children, but now you've mentioned it, I'm sure I'll give it some thought. I suppose, well, getting back to the whole thing about delegating and paying for services, I would like them to take that approach, because I do believe it'll create a less stressful life for them. They'll play to their strengths. And then again, if you know, we are talking about maybe earning a bigger income and having seeing the world and adventurous and things like that, I think that'll all tie in nicely.
Absolutely. You know, I know, with my children, we've always encouraged them to work, for what they want. So in terms of pocket money, etc., it has been, a reward based. They have to empty the dishwasher, they have to put out the recycling, etc. Now my 16-year-old is able to get a Saturday job. That is because we want him, in particular at his age, to have that awareness of the value of money, and not just to see mum and dad as, the bank of mum and dad. And, that's a lesson he is definitely taking on board, particularly as he has very expensive taste in clothes. So, we've had to educate him that there's certain things that we will, of course, provide, but if he wants to go over and above that, then he has to be thinking about saving, and that is a foreign word, in his vocabulary.
Yeah, I suppose, well, my eldest is 7, and I think we're starting to get to that stage where he's starting to understand more about money. But he receives £10 a month, and it's gone by the first of the month. He's always asking when the first is, and you know, we talk about, well, you know, if you save part of that, you'll be able to buy more things further down the line. But he just, yeah, he hasn't quite got that. But certainly, as you say about emptying the dishwasher and things like that, yeah, that I think that's probably going to be a conversation me and my wife will be having in the near future. The benefits there.
And what would you, knowing what you know now, what would you have changed about your relationship with money sooner?
Ooh, so going back to those life events, I would say I've been guilty of what I call as comparisonitis. So I'll throw a big life event. 2007-8, my wife had got diagnosed with cancer, and she sadly passed away like 15 months after she'd been diagnosed. Then around about 6 months later, I got made redundant from my job. So I had obviously dealing with grieving, difficult scenario, then got made redundant. And I made a brave decision to have a career change. So I went from I was a branch manager in the travel industry, to then wanting to go down the route of being qualified as a sports psychologist. So completely different. To do that, I needed to go back to university, do a full-time degree for 3 years, then do a master's degree for 2 years, which I did part-time. And so during that period, obviously there was challenging enough with the grieving, and then different networks and being around lots of younger people. But I think what I found was, I had to go back to basics. I'd been used to going on holiday 3-4 times a year, nice hotels, lovely lifestyle. So I had to go back to basics. But yeah, I did get drawn into for quite a period where I would look at friends and get into comparing what they're earning, what I was earning, and it was such an uncertain process as well. The retraining, it was difficult. Financially as well, having to say no a lot to going out socially, and then holidays and things like that. Really, I don't know. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that one now, but certainly it made me really think an awful lot about the money and where I wanted to get to in the future.
And I think, that's the thing. Very often, with many parts of our life, we can just get on a particular path and just continue without actually thinking about what else we could do, how differently we could do things. And it's only when, as you say, a big life event happens, for lots of us, that tends to be, a particular decade, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, is when we stop and actually assess where we want to go to next. But I can imagine when something traumatic like losing your wife happens, again, you don't necessarily sit down and think, okay, how am I going to plan out this next stage of my life? It just happens, and you just go on a particular path until you get to a point where you actually think, is this for me? Do I want to carry on down this particular path?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I did actually take that step back and did really like a whole lot of reflection, because I took 3 months off work for a period, and I think it was at that point where I was thinking, well, look, you're going to have a life to live here, and are you happy doing what you're doing? What are you going to do? So I had that sort of that longer term goal, but I didn't have the self-awareness around falling into those traps of being jealous and being a bit resentful and angry about friends, really. And when I look back, I think now I've learned this one off my own podcast. In some ways, I think when you feel those strong emotions about other people, that's actually your stuff. It's not their stuff. And yeah, it's worth just digging a little bit deeper to understand what that's all about. Otherwise, you'll just keep getting upset, and which is really unhelpful.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, and that's a massive thing, isn't it? It is a massive epiphany when you realize that you feel feelings of dislike or loathing or something stronger for other people based on the success that they're having, the things that they're doing that you are not doing. And that switch or that self-education that actually what I'm doing is transferring my feelings about myself and the things I'm not doing and not achieving onto somebody else. And that can be very, very uncomfortable to do, because up until that point you were batting it back and blaming it on somebody else. They're less than, rather than actually you are the one that is feeling less than.
Yeah, that's really interesting and opens something up. So if I go back to my previous career, there was always a level of frustration there, I would say, where I was always the type who would work hard, and I would probably work too hard, in all honesty, for not enough money. And I'd always work up the ranks. But yeah, I'd be, if there was certain friends who would talk a lot about money, and they were very what's the word? They were very, what I would say, materialistic, and I didn't like spending time with them people. But again, because of those feelings that I just mentioned earlier. But again, that was more about my stuff, I think, where I was probably quite frustrated in the career that I was in, where now, okay, I went through a period where I wasn't earning a great deal of money and it was difficult, but I probably didn't have that level of frustration when those conversations took place, because I always had my eye on, right, this is where I want to get to. And essentially I was taking responsibility, and I was trying to make things happen rather than just let things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting, as you were talking there, something popped into my mind, that self-awareness, when you're going through that process of self-awareness, it can be a really uncomfortable, painful thing to go through. A little bit like the phrase ignorance is bliss, and sometimes just not having that awareness of the need to change in you until you start going through that process and then coming out the other end and realizing, well, actually, I am a better person. I have a better understanding. I can change that internal conversation I'm having with myself. In doing what you do as a sports psychologist, when your clients come to you as sports professionals, are they much more blinkered, or bunker mentality, probably is probably a better description? Do they have much more of a bunker mentality in terms of being focused entirely on their performance, or is there that comparatinitis that drives a professional sports person to want to be better as well?
Now, yeah, with the professional, if we go with football for argument's sake, certainly I would say the younger players, where we're talking maybe 18 up to 21, 20, 22-ish, I think there's an awful lot of that comparison going on, where they're looking at their colleagues who've maybe gone out on loan to a club, or looking at how successful one of their friends is being, and then that likely as well it'll be where they'll be looking at cars and bank balances as well, and how much they're getting paid. So there's definitely a lot of extrinsic things going on there, too much in my eyes. And I suppose that's my role, to try and bring them back to what is it you actually need to do to get to that level. So yeah, it's managing that jealousy, I suppose. Where if you look at, I think if you look at other sports, so golf's another sport I'm heavily involved in, and at the lower level, there's not much money in the game. But I think so. I think what happens there is the for a lot of them, there's not a huge amount of thought with regards to money, other than the fact that actually, right, I'm playing here to earn money and to have some sort of income. But a lot of them will have sponsorship and different deals. I think their relationship, when it comes down to money, it ends up getting back to their technical side of their golf swing or their putting, that side of thing, and I suppose the financial worries end up bringing it back to that, and where they put a lot more pressure on themselves, because then they're not the professional footballer who's getting paid a nice salary even at the age of 18.
And with successful sports people, what when they have reached a particular level, what comes first? Is it their performance or their rewards? Are the rewards just the output of their performance, or at that stage are they more motivated by the rewards?
Well, if you look at super successful people, let's go Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, that type of person, Novak Djokovic, and these guys they're chasing trophies essentially. That's their job, and that's what they've been doing their whole careers. What was interesting, I noticed at Wimbledon this year, so Djokovic played Nick Kyrgios, and so Nick Kyrgios, Australian tennis player, and he turned around and said, I think before they played, that I think he would sort of die happy if he won one, and that was it. So that showed a very different mentality to the super successful person in Djokovic and the other guys. And sure enough, Djokovic won, which I think to me just shows that level of hunger that he's got. And then that desire to, where they're looking at the trophies, but then they're breaking it down to the processes, just like we do in business. You'll have your financial rewards that you want to earn, but actually to get there, you've got to break it down to the boring, simple things that you do day in, day out.
And I'm very aware, in the coaching world, as I'm sure you are as well, that a whole lot of business success comes down to our sense of self-worth, self-value, and being able to amp that up as much as we can to ensure we're doing those things we need to do in order to have a successful business. And as I'm sitting here talking to you, I presume the same is exactly the same when it comes down to the most successful sports people. It does come down to their self-belief that they can actually have that success.
Yeah, I think with a lot of sports people, you find that their self-worth is tied into their performance, and that is not a good combination there. So they've got, it's certainly in my role, you're trying to manage that hugely. I suppose what you're trying to do is you're trying to help them recognize what their values are as a whole in their life, their roles, if they're a husband, a wife, a brother, a sister, different things, and often what you actually may encourage as well is finding other avenues, other things outside of their sport. I mean, it's frowned upon by some coaches. I suppose if let's go back a few years when David Beckham was on the scene, he was David Beckham the footballer, but he was also David Beckham the brand, if you like, where he had so many things going on off the football pitch. And some coaches do not like that whatsoever, but actually that was probably quite healthy for him, because it built up his sense of self-worth. And I know I've spoken to different professional athletes, and they like that. They like having different things outside of their sport, because often the guys who don't are the ones whose self-worth, self-esteem just nosedives when everything goes wrong on the pitch or the course.
And they probably have a harder landing when things go wrong, because all they have, in inverted commas, all they have is their sports career. That's a really insightful comment, because actually you could play that absolutely into probably the business world, because a lot of people running businesses do tend to be very, very, very focused on their business, and when something doesn't work in their business, the only place they've got to go to is a place of feeling less than, possibly despair, depending on what's going on. So I think that's a really good thing for for me and all our listeners to be thinking about, actually developing that sense of success right across the board, be that through, I don't know, charity initiatives or external activity, where, as you say, you can increase your sense of self-worth and self-value, that you are validated in other ways other than just your business.
Yeah, you've got me thinking now about a model in psychology. So it's from a theory called self-determination theory. Basically, you've got the three basic psychological needs for autonomy, so having a sense of control over your destiny. You've got relatedness, so really it's being connected to other people and nature. And then the third one's about competence, which is like mastery of the task. And if you can get a nice blend of the three, then in general, you're probably going to be quite happy. It's going to be helpful for your psychological well-being. But certainly as a sports performer or as a business person, if you put all your eggs in one basket, where you're in that competence basket, and you're working crazy hours, then it can definitely be detrimental to relationships. And then this whole feeling of the sense of autonomy just is thrown right out of the window. And I think often that can be born out of a lack of trust in some ways around what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so it links closely with your self-belief. And I've been there.
And that also links, I think, very nicely into, they say that, the most financially successful people have at least 7 revenue streams, 7 income streams. And I suppose that can also help play into that sense of self-worth, from the perspective of, if one income stream starts to dip, or for whatever reason is no longer working, you actually know you've got what else is going on for you from a business perspective, where you can turn up a tap or look to see what is going on in a little bit more, what's what I'm looking for? Detached. So in a detached way, because you are not reliant on that one income stream, and therefore panic-stricken if things are not working. So when you've got that going on in your wider life as well, more feeding in to you, filling your cup, then that gives you the ability to be more objective in those other areas where things might not necessarily be going quite as well.
Yeah, that takes us back a little bit to the delegation angle in some ways. But I think of a tire, and if you're a good leader or manager, then you want to be on the outside of the tire, really, where you are, as you say, you're taking a bit of a step back there, and you're delegating various different tasks and empowering people, whereas the leader who's in the middle, who's involved in everything, they're gonna wear themselves out. And it's so easy to do that, isn't it, as the business person and entrepreneur. And I think that is a challenge going back to sport, some sports people will have like but we say a professional golfer who turns from the amateur level to professional, that it's very different. There's so many other things that they have to do. So making sure they've got a good management team and a good sort of coaching setup and support system, it is vital for them.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly it, isn't it? Is when you realize that the importance of, you know, of your self-worth, your self-value, because you are giving off so much of yourself when it comes to building a business and doing all those things for yourself to begin with, at least, but recognizing you don't have to be good at all of them. You might be a great salesperson, but not quite so good on the marketing side. You might be great at managing numbers, but not so effective at being able to put together a good content plan for your social media, etc., etc. But I think when you are really self-aware of what you are good at, and then happy to let go and say to somebody else, this isn't my strength, can you support me in this area? What you are doing there is being very, very focused on what your skill set is, but not being hard on yourself, because you haven't got that ability. And does anybody have the ability to be good at everything? And I think for me, coming into this entrepreneurial space 12 years ago, from being in corporate, where you were very much pigeonholed. You were in sales, you were in marketing, you were in finance, you were in product development. You weren't expected to be good at all of them. But when you come in to run your own business, it can take a lot of soul searching to accept that your strength cannot lie in all those different fields.
Yeah, there's something about trying to be perfect there, isn't there? And you know, yeah, perfection doesn't exist. Again, it's certainly one of the things I see in sport, but yeah, massively overlaps into business. And yeah, with perfection, as you say, you are going to have your strengths. You're going to have areas which you're not going to be good at. So yeah, let's try and delegate those areas. Also, you mentioned there about being hard on yourself. I think the perfectionist in that respect can be very, very self-critical, which can then link with link into their self-esteem, their self-worth. So it's something to factor in, is trying to be kinder to yourself. I know of a therapeutic technique, it's called compassionate focused therapy, which is being kinder to yourself. That's something I use more and more in my work these days. And that would be helpful for any of your listeners who fall into that trap. One other thing on that take as well, when we're talking about perfectionism, there's a lot of good things about trying to be, I suppose, perfect and do things. You're naturally going to be driven and you're going to be highly motivated. The one other downside I would say is the recovery angle. How are you actually going to take good care of yourself and rest? You know, are you allowing yourself to get enough sleep? Are you giving yourself enough time off? Because again, if I go back to the athlete, and I know certainly some of the battles I've had business wise, some people aren't very good at maybe taking a weekend off or taking holidays and things like that. But actually, longevity wise, you need to, otherwise you're just going to burn yourself out.
Absolutely. And I did a post in my Facebook group this morning, and I called it Wealth Care Wednesdays, because being wealthy isn't just a number, you know, in your bank account. It is so much more than that. It's looking after your health. It's looking after your relationships, because you need to have that triad going on if truly you're going to have that level of contentment, that level of satisfaction. And to be able to do the things that you want to do, you need to look after your self-care, you need to be healthy, you need to avoid burnout, etc. But I think sometimes as a business owner, you can become too fixated on that financial target rather than realizing to be truly successful, you need to look after not just the financial aspects, but you need to look after you, and you need to look after those around you. And when you've got that, I think that probably is the truest measure of success.
Yeah, that takes me back to some conversations I've had with different business owners about, I suppose, a bigger picture mentality. And from what I've seen, often some business owners can be so fixated with the financial bit that, you know, the thought of taking, say, 8 weeks, 10 weeks holiday per year just doesn't enter their head, because all they're thinking is, well, if I'm not working, then I'm losing money, essentially. But yeah, it all becomes part of the package. So I think that's definitely something that everybody can benefit from, is just trying to see that bigger picture, that clearer perspective on what it is that they're, I suppose, why they're working, essentially, and why they're bringing this money to. Ideally, I would like to think for a lot of people is to, you know, you don't live to work, do you? You actually work to live. Well, that's certainly my mentality.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And you don't want to be, you know, the richest person in the graveyard either, do you?
Yeah, there's a lot of people do that, don't they? They retire, and then within a year or so they've passed away, sadly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what is next for you, David? What is next?
So yeah, I suppose I'm going through that process now where, you know, you talk there about 7 income streams. I would say I've got 2 at present, so it's then looking at the third one. Where does that come from? And then once we get that one nailed down, then we'll start thinking about the fourth one. But actually, can I just rewind back a little bit?
Yeah, carry on.
When it comes down to, I suppose, my career, because when I think back, and this is an important one, as a sports psychologist, I think the field in general is, you know, it's quite a new field, and there is a lot of a lack of value in the field, and possibly that is the case with mindset in general. But what that means when you're going through the training process, so you do your degree, you do your master's degree, then you do a supervised practice period for anywhere between 2 and 4 years. During that supervised practice period, you're often told messages like, you know, do it for nothing, do it for free. And I was given those messages, and I didn't like the messages at the time, because I thought, well, I've got 4 years behind me here, as well as a lot of experience, so I'm going to charge for my services. And when I got to the end of it was 2 years for me, supervised practice, I charged for some of the time, and I hadn't charged for the periods as well. And I got a bit of paper, and I thought, oh great, I've made it. But I was scarred, I think, like with the financial side at that point, because I hadn't been charging a great deal, and it was difficult to then shift from charging a very low fee to then charging what I really was worth as a qualified chartered sports psychologist. So I think we always have to remind ourselves of the value that we actually give to people.
Absolutely, and massively, and also to realise that people largely only derive value from something that they're paying for. So results do tend to be coming mostly when you have paid to get those results, because it's only when you do the work when you have skin in the game. So to advise anybody, don't charge, isn't actually going to give either the person doing the practice or the person receiving the service the most benefit, because neither are actually feeling valued or gaining value. And I think that is where a lot of people go wrong when they undercharge. Actually, in undercharging, they're doing a disservice to the very person they're trying to help. Because you're probably like me, how many freebies have you downloaded, or very low cost courses have you clicked and bought? And actually, they're gathering dust somewhere on your laptop because you've never found the time to go back and review them. And that was something, I learned very, very, kind of early on in my coaching career, was that actually the best thing that you can do is truly charge based on the results you are bringing for your clients, because those people who value what you're doing, they will do the work, they will get the results, and they'll thank you for the part that you played in helping them to get the results. If you're not charging enough and they don't value it, they won't do the work, they won't get the results, and guess who they'll blame? You. It won't be them for not doing the work. So I think that was a really valid point for you to bring up, that actually that pricing piece has got to be driven from the perspective of serving and the results that you want your clients to get. And it's only when you hit that sweet spot for the relevant client, because obviously there'll be different markets and different price points, but for the sweet spot of the clients that you want, if you price yourself well, the results will speak for themselves, and the pricing will be the value that it brings for those clients.
Yeah, no, you've hit something. Well, what I do when I get an inquiry through, I tend to give them two options. So in the team that we've got, there's three of us who are what you would class as experienced sports psychologists, and then I've got a number of guys who I supervise, who are going through that training process. So what I offer the prospective client is the larger fee for the experienced, and then a lower fee, but still what I think is a competitive fee for someone who's going through the training process. But it's quite interesting, because I would say probably 95% of people will actually pay the largest fee and pay the money.
And it's not like I am comparing your services in any way, shape or form to a hairdresser, but hairdressers in a salon do exactly the same thing. You pay the most for the most experienced hairdresser, and you pay the lowest amount for the least experienced. But people have the choice. They can decide, where to go. And I think that is what people should be doing, is considering who is their client base and how can they most effectively serve them. And that could be by offering a different choice when it comes to how that service is delivered in exactly the way that you've described there. So that's a perfect way to end the conversation. Thank you. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is the 3ws.sport-excellence.co.uk, and it's got a range of resources on there, from some freebies. My podcast, Demystifying Mental Toughness, is well and truly listed on there, and there's hundreds of blogs as well for the sports performer or the young child or parent. And I'm on all of the social media channels. I suppose if you search for David Charlton, Sports Psychologist in LinkedIn, that's probably the easiest place to find me. So yeah.
Don't worry, all of those details will be in the show notes so that people can easily connect with you.